The first method that we're going to look at involves using something called user data to cache the path after it's been generated. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to point out that this is not the best solution to this problem. However, it is simpler than the best solution to this problem, and it also gives me an opportunity to introduce you guys to user data, which may be useful in other applications. So, what is user data? User data is a really helpful concept in Houdini. It basically means that we can store any arbitrary data on a node, so long as that data can be represented as a string. So essentially what we're going to be doing is attaching a Python dictionary to a node. And we can do this inside of LockedOTLs, although it's a bit strange the way that works, and we'll be going over that later in the video. The biggest thing to notice about user data is that it is actually saved into the HIP file, which makes it very helpful in our case. The bad thing about it is that it is also saved into the definitions of OTLs, which may or may not be what you want. In this case, it's not. But we'll be looking at a way to get around that. Okay, so let's take a look first at how to actually deal with user data and try to get a more robust understanding of what user data actually is. So if I just go ahead and display the read-write node real fast, I'm just going to create a new shelf, call it week 6, week 6. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to create two shelf tools, one for setting user data and one for reading the user data that's already on the node. And then we'll be using these utility tools to see what our scripts are doing once we start using user data. So let's go ahead and make the tool that reads and displays the user data first. Now, as you may not be aware, every node in Houdini that you put down actually already comes with user data attached to it. So when I say that we're setting user data, what that means is that we're setting a key in that user data. So this means that we can actually read what's already there. So let's do that first. So under our week 6 shelf, let's just create a new tool. Let's call it display user data, and hit apply. And now the way that we want this to work is we want it to loop over all the nodes that we currently have selected, and we're going to be accumulating a list of, or a message to display at the end. And that message will be a list of nodes and then user data key and value. So it should end up looking something like this: /obj/file test /read write, and then maybe like 2 spaces, and then key value, key value, key value. So this is the message that we want to display, and it'll have one of these for each node. So this is pretty easy to do. All we need to do is say let's just start by creating a variable called message and set it to an empty string. Then we'll loop over all the selected nodes, like so. So who node is our current node. And then what we'll do is we will get access to the user data. Now there are a couple of different ways that we can read the user data off of a node. The most straightforward one is probably just to say user data equals who node.user data, and then give it a key. We don't actually know what keys are in our user data yet, so we want to use the other method, which is to get all the user data at once. So the way that we can do that is just by using the user data dict function on the node. User data dict will return as a dictionary all of the user data on the node, so just like it sounds. So let's just go ahead and print user data for now and see what that does. So we'll hit apply, we'll select our read write node and click display user data. And there it is. You can see that it says version and an empty string. This is the default user data that comes with our OTLs. And what this is actually doing is it's telling us what the internal version of the OTL is. So it should be, if we go to type properties, just go ahead and clear that one real fast. Close that. So if we set this to blorg and hit apply, and then it's still selected, so we click on that. There's blorg. Clear and close. I'm just going to get rid of that. Now the internal versioning system for OTLs is a bit strange and probably doesn't work the way that you would expect. So we're not going to be going over it in this class. But that's what that user data is to begin with. So I'm just going to hit accept here to get rid of that dialog. And let's see how we can leverage this for creating our message. So the first thing that we probably want to do is append the current node's path to our message. So we can say message plus equals who node dot path plus a colon at the end. And this colon is just so that we can get that format that we wanted before. Now we are going to want to go down to the next line after this, so let's just put a \n here. And \n is essentially stands for a new line. So anytime Houdini or Python sees this in a string, it's going to bump it down to the next line. Now we need to go through the user data dict one by one and add those items to our message. So what we can do is we can use a function on the Python dictionary to loop over everything in the dictionary. So how do we do that? Well, if you don't know Python dictionaries very well, the way that you would do that is to say for key comma val in user data dot items. This is a Python concept, if you aren't aware of it. Essentially, if we have a list that looks something like this, so something like this, Python knows how to interpret this in a for loop. So as long as there are always two items so each index of the list has to be another list, and as long as there are two items in those lists, Houdini will just set these two variables for each iteration of the loop. So essentially on the first iteration of the loop, key will be item 1, and then val will be item 2. And then on the second iteration of the loop, key will be item 3 and val will be item 4. So items is returning a list from this dictionary that is formatted similarly to this. If you didn't understand that, don't worry about it. You probably won't need it a whole lot in Python, although it can make some things easier. The main thing to realize is that you can use this syntax with this items function. Okay, so now what we can do is just say message plus equals. Remember that we need the two spaces at the beginning, plus key, plus colon, and actually let's put a space there too, plus val. So this should make something that looks something like this. In the end. And now, since we are at the end of our line here, and we want the next one to go onto a separate line, we just want to put plus \n at the end, just to make sure that it goes down to the next line. And that's it. Now all we have to do is display our message, who.ui.display message. and we should get what we want. So if we hit apply, and we click on this guy, and then display user data, indeed. Now if we go back to our type properties dialog and we set version to fawn, hit accept, and then display user data, you can see that it displays properly. So we can use this tool now to read what changes we're making to the user data on our nodes. I'm just going to go back to type properties and clear this version string and hit accept. Alright, so this tool is done. Let's just hit accept here. And let's talk about setting user data. Alright, so let's create our shelf tool for setting user data. Now this one is slightly more complex, but it's not too bad. So if we right click and say new tool, and say set user data, apply and accept, edit tool. Alright. So what we're going to want to do again is loop over all the nodes and set user data on there. So let's just do this blindly first without asking the user what to set, just to see how to make this work, and then we'll figure out how to get input from the user. So the first thing we want to do is loop over the selected nodes. So for who node in who.selected nodes. Hopefully by now this line looks very familiar to all of you guys. And then we can say something like who node dot set user data. And this is the function that we're interested in. Now the way this works is we just give it two arguments. We give it a key and a value. So for the key we could say something like blorg key, and for the value we could say something like fawn value. And hit apply. Now one thing that's important to note here is that this part of the user data can only be a string. So Houdini cannot handle any other kind of data type. Now this normally isn't really much of a problem because you can just convert whatever it is into a string and then convert it back once you need to use it. But it can be quite annoying when you're trying to save objects with lots of data on them. Alright, so let's select our read write node and click set user data. No errors. Let's see if it set it. So if we select it, we know that display user data works. So let's click on that. And there's our blorg key and fawn value. Alright, so let's hit OK. Okay, so how do we get input from the user? Well, we need to know two things. We need to know the key that we are going to be setting, and we need to know the value that we're going to be setting that key to. So Houdini actually gives us a function that will allow us to do this. So we can say who.ui.read multi-input. We can give it a message like specify key value pair. Input labels, it wants a list of labels. So we could say something like key value, and then close parenthesis. And what it's going to do is it's going to decide how many inputs to read based on how many labels we give it. So we could even make these capitalized. And then you can see that it returns an int and tuple of strings. And basically the int value is the error code that we're used to, and the tuple of strings is these values. So let's just go ahead and say user input equals this. and then print user input. Hit apply. So now if we click set user data, we get this nice dialog. We can say blurg fawn and hit OK. So this is the type of input that we are expecting to receive. Clear and close. So the last thing that we'll want to do to make this tool complete is give users a cancel button. So if we hit a comma here, we can just say buttons equal OK and cancel. So now if we hit apply and we click on this button, if we hit OK, it's 0. If we hit cancel, it's 1. So now we can say if user input 0 equals 0, because that's the OK buttons index. Pop that out. Now we can say key equals user, or actually let's even just bring that out. So we'll say set value equals user input 1. So this is the key value pair that the user wants to set, and then we'll just get it from there. So what we want to do here is just change the key that we're going to be setting to set value 0, and the value we're going to be setting to set value 1. So now if we hit apply, we can select this guy and say set user data. Key can be Zorg, value can be some awesome path, or whatever, since we're just testing. Now if we hit OK, make sure that this is still selected, click on display user input, there's our Zorg. Alright, very cool.